So this is more of a decision-making guide for people asking what teams they should actually use and a sharing of how I farm my characters on Chaos runs. I mainly farm on Lab 0, so that's what I'll focus on in this video. So to begin, I will quickly say that you should farm on difficulty 8, and this is because you can get save data value 13 more easily than on difficulty 7. I would also ignore difficulties 9, 10, and 11 because they are solely for challenging yourself and not for deck building. They also don't provide any additional rewards aside from the first clear, and they also get a lot harder, being more than 15 levels higher than difficulty 8. So before we can decide which teams to bring in, we need to know if we are farming for a damage dealer or a support. Because we don't want to die from the lack of healing and shielding or just from the lack of damage, I usually have two teams. So for the first team, if the character I'm building is a damage dealer, I usually pair them up with Mika and Veronica. For team 2, if the character I'm building is a support, I replace Mika and choose 2 damage dealers instead. Let me explain the general idea behind these choices. So when farming for a character, we're usually looking for copies of your cards. Since the duplicate events are choosing 3 random cards from your decks, we want to remove cards from other characters so that the RNG chooses our main character's cards instead. That's why choosing your teammates has to follow these criteria. So the first criteria is that they have to function well with as minimal cards as possible. So if we are removing their cards, they have to be able to carry their own weight and contribute damage or healing. So the second criteria is that this character must not need to have the epiphanies in order for them to carry. This is because we want most of the epiphanies to be going directly to the main character that we're building the save file for. Let me explain with my 2 main choices. So I picked Veronica because you can remove most of her cards and she will still do damage with her ballistas. So Firing Prep also has a bonus, which is a unique card, so we know that it would never be one of the 3 random cards chosen at duplicate events. She also has another unique card and her pendant can upgrade into a unique tag. So that's 2 to 3 cards we save on card removals and 2 to 3 cards that will help her pull her own weight. So on the topic of unique cards, here's something interesting you can do. You can go to card collection in the menu tab and then you can go to the search bar and type in unique. This will show you all the cards that have the unique tag on it. So this is only applicable to cards that starts out with the unique tag. If they're gonna get an epiphany that gives them the unique tag, they will not show those cards. But still, this is really helpful when you're trying to plan out your own teams. Okay, so why Mika? I honestly really like Mika because of her E2, and this is where whenever she gains stress, she will just heal 200%. This is basically passive healing and honestly more than spending 1 AP on her basic cards to heal. So I feel like this isn't really talked about, and this is the recover mechanic. So recover is whenever you restore health, and that's it. If you're at full health, it doesn't work. And whenever you heal, you just recover a little bit of your stress. So for Mika, whenever she takes damage and the stress falls onto her, she just heals it back with her E2 and recovers some of that stress back too. And even if the enemy doesn't attack us and we don't take damage, every turn in a battle we're still gaining stress. So if it falls onto Mika, she will just heal passively. But take note that this only happens once a turn. So tell me this isn't stress management on easy mode. You can also just remove most of Mika's cards and get by just fine. Plus one of her cards has the unique tag, so you save yourself yet another card removal event. But what if you don't have Veronica? And what if you just don't want to use Mika because you're cool like that? And honestly, Veronica is irreplaceable for farming. I've never successfully farmed without her because her unique cards are just that important for copy event consistency. She's also just that strong without much preparation. Get it? Firing preparation? No, that didn't make sense. But if you don't have Veronica, you can still farm. It's just going to be a lot harder. You would have to face more RNG on copy events and you would need more card removal events. Overall, just less consistent results. You can absolutely still do it without Veronica and with any character that you want. That is if you farm on the 0 system, but I will talk about that in a later section. As for Mika, if you don't have her, a good replacement is actually Ray.
Hi, Ray desu!
But Ray would also need her E2 because that is what allows her to heal when she attacks. If you're using Ray, you're going to have to make choices where you have to use her 1-cost AB cards just to heal a little bit more actively than Mika's passive healing. But Ray is great because she can buff your entire team's damage for characters like Chizuru. In fact, since Chizuru is the most recent character, I would say that Chizuru plus Ray and Veronica is better than using Mika. And I can tell you from experience that I've noticed a huge difference in my runs being a lot more easier after making this change. So when I'm farming support characters like Cassius or Leia, I would replace Mika with Calipe. And I pick a Calipe for the exact same reason as Veronica, because you can remove most of Calipe's cards and she would still perform well. Calipe can perform with just her 2-cost basic attack card and voucher ejection. You can remove everything else. So Calipe also doesn't need her epiphanies for her to function, and because she's a Vanguard, she can get vulnerable on her cards, and that's just gonna make our runs a lot easier. Calipe also provides shielding, which is great when you're removing Mika and losing the healing source. Also, shielding building has another interesting mechanic where if you block an attack entirely and don't take any health damage, you're not gonna gain any stress from that. Of course, you still gain stress from the start of the turn though. So my final team for building support characters is just to pair them up with Veronica and Calipe. I don't have Hugo, Rin, Meilin, and Yuki, which are really popular characters. And the ones I have, I can kind of say that they need their cards to be good. And since I can't test these characters, I won't confidently recommend any, but following the logic of can they carry with minimal cards, then Hugo is a really good choice, considering he works around Lightning Dingo. Since launch, Hugo, Mika, and Tressa has always been popular anyway. If you are using Veronica, I would like to think that Meilin and Rin would still pair well with her. The key is to look for characters that can still contribute damage or healing without epiphanies, and work with minimal cards. Of course, if you have the team you recommend, then please share it in the comments and I'll have to try it out. Before we go into route planning, let's quickly talk about partners and equipment because these are what make your run a lot smoother. So Arwen is the queen in chaos runs. She basically reduces incoming damage by 10%, and if you upgrade her fully, it will go up to 20%. That is an insane amount. So whenever I'm doing a chaos run, I know I don't have her in my team just because I feel like I needed to heal a lot more than usual. You can honestly also use Alyssa, who also heals you at the end of battle by 3%, and if you upgrade her fully, it will go up to 6%. For equipment wise, if you're using characters that heal poorly, you will want to try to get this gear that heals you. But if you have a bunch of shops ahead of you, you don't have to worry about these items, since you can just use the campfires to manage your healing. And I will only recommend to buy these equipments if you have access credits. You want to save your credits and prioritize card removals at shops instead. I actually really like Lab Zero for this one event where you get this evade charm because you can evade one hit. Also, since we get this really early on, it actually helps us from having to heal a lot. Pro tip, always choose the attack option to get the most out of it. When you get card removal events, don't just randomly remove cards. For Veronica and Mika teams, I typically remove all of Mika's cards first. This is because Veronica has useful cards that lets you draw or do more damage. You want to keep those until the next card removal to help you clear. This includes Kirken's Messenger event when there is a select 1 or 2 card removal. I would actually remove Source of Water and one basic card from the character I am building. For Calipe and Veronica teams, I usually remove Calipe's cards first, but I will always try to keep Vulture Ejection and Greatsword Aquila because they help with damage and clearing. If you still don't have the Epiphany upgrades on your main character, then you also want to prioritize removing cards from the other characters that hasn't gotten their Epiphanies yet. Your modifiers choices should cater to your team's strengths and weaknesses. Typically, this is how I would rank the modifiers by difficulty. But you should also consider your own playstyle and what you think you can deal with. If you think that your healing is enough for your team, then you should go with Anxiety. But most importantly, I would never take Harden, Tyrant, Plague, and Neglect. Well, it should be obvious, but giving enemies Fortitude is honestly cancerous for multi-hit cards. If you're going to do 50% damage by 2 hits, and they have 1 stack of Fortitude, you're just going to do 30%. If they have 3 stacks of Fortitude, you're just not going to do any damage at all. You're just waiting for death. Tyrant and Plague is honestly just not worth dealing with. You can try to get max health sources to counter Plague, but it's just not worth it. Neglect and Revenge are also very situational. So Neglect discards a random card at the start of a turn, so you actually draw 1 less card. Sometimes you can lose Firing Preparation, and that makes Veronica useless the whole battle. Revenge is scary only if the enemy summons a lot of monsters. So if you're farming in Blue Pot or Twin Star Shadows with this, then you're just asking for a hard time. The rest are just free to take and much more manageable. So about Zero System versus Lab Zero, Zero System is just more consistent in getting a good save file. Take a look at the database and you can actually see there's a lot more card removal events in Zero System. Also, your copy events are actually all selectors and is mostly guaranteed every run. If we could reset Zero System and merge new planets as cheaply as Lab Zero, I would recommend Zero System all the way. But because it's just too expensive and there's just too much RNG in that we can't guarantee the planet we want from merging, and we are forced to settle it for whatever modifiers and save data value we are given, then I think that we should just stick to Lab Zero for now, and then once we have enough resources, we go to Zero System. Now let's talk about the actual strategy once you're in Lab Zero. Floor 1 generally doesn't have many great events that allow us to remove cards, so I would always prioritize shop to remove cards with credits first. Then I would always aim for the question mark events, looking for the convert card event that lets me convert a card into the mutant sample. Personally, I would avoid tunnels unless I'm looking for forbidden cards or if I'm still lacking any epiphanies for my main character. In floor 2, I would still prioritize shops since it's a reliable way to get card removals. And I'll also count the number of shops left so I can ensure that I have enough card removals for my main character. I will also avoid tunnels because they always seem to provide the same rewards, which is just a neutral card, a divine epiphany on a random card, and 100 credits. So unless I need any of these, I would never use them, especially if it appears in the second half where the copy event mostly appears in. Now let's talk about the part that isn't as fun, that is resetting. We typically reset when we don't get the Epiphany upgrade we want, or we didn't get the first copy at the first floor boss. But resetting when you don't get a perfect RNG is the least enjoyable part of farming. That's actually why I personally don't do it as much anymore. And honestly, I'm just having way more fun this way. But here's what I want you to take away from this video, is that everything before this section, the team building, route planning, modifier selection, and card removal strategy, those are decisions you can control, and that to me is the fun part. The resetting for Epiphanies is just too much RNG that we can't control. And I honestly wouldn't recommend doing it excessively because part of the enjoyment is that we can make weird builds work, and you don't need a perfect deck to clear content as I've shown in my other video. So these are reset combinations that are optional, and you can pick and choose a combination of these for your godly save file. If at the start you don't get 2 card removal options, you reset. If you don't see enough shops in your party for card removals, you reset. If within the first 3 events, if you don't see the mutant sample event, you reset. If you don't get the card Epiphany upgrade you want, you reset. If you don't get a copy of the card you want at the first boss, you reset. If you don't get a forbidden card you want, then you reset. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. Personally, I only reset if I don't get the Epiphany upgrade I want, and even that, I find unfun. And that's it. That's how I farm and how I decide on my team. Do you agree with my thought process, or do you have your own method of farming for save file and your own team? Let me know down in the comments below. And if this video was helpful to you, please like it, and you can also comment if you have any questions. I usually read them all and I answer as many as I can. Good luck with your farming, and I'll see you next time.